Every story I tell you after that is going to be better than this one. It would actually be funny if it happened to someone else. But it didn't happen to someone else, it happened to me. So therefore, it's not funny. It's tragic. So this happened in an on-site class, Introduction to C++, in Kansas City, Kansas. So I had to define my terms. Training can be characterized as either in-person or remote, online. And the in-person classes can be further divided into two categories, public and on-site. So public is when there's a training company that announces, advertises, in our training facility on such and such a week, we're going to be offering such and such a class, and anyone who wants to attend, just, pay whatever we're charging, and you can come and attend the class. It's a public class. And an on-site class is when a company contacts a training company and says, we want you to send an instructor to our location. We will provide the facility, and we'll just fill up the classroom with as many people as we want. And then the training company says, all right, so we'll charge you this fixed rate for that class. So this was an on-site class, Kansas. The thing about on-site classes, where they're held in the customer location, is that people are constantly coming and going. In the public classes, especially like people who flew in from out of town, all right, they're not going to invest in, the airfare and the hotel for a week and then just, not show up. But in the on-site classes, they've got the classroom, so it doesn't cost them any more if they fill it with 40 people than if they fill it with 20 people. So they'll throw in a whole bunch of people, and some people will leave because they never should have been there in the first place, or more likely, what more typically happens is, they want to attend the class, but then, some crisis happens at work because they are at work, and they can't. They get, pulled away. Or like they couldn't attend on Monday because of some crisis, so they show up on Tuesday. And they say, well, if you weren't here on Monday, you're not going to understand anything that we're going to present between Tuesday and Friday. Well, I know, but I couldn't be here, and I'm supposed to be here this week, and so I may as well just sit and, learn nothing. So, yeah, that is, that's why people pay to send their employees somewhere else, so that, that kind of stuff doesn't happen. When you're an instructor, then you're used to it. You don't think anything of it. If someone comes for like a day, 2 days, 3 days, and then leaves, and you never see them again. So that's what happened. So that week. Wednesday, there were like 2 women. They stayed until the lunch break on Wednesday, and then they went to lunch and never came back. So that's fine. That happens all the time. So it's not ideal. Ideally, training should take place in a lead encased, electromagnetically shielded building. A Faraday cage. Where no one can contact you and pull you out of class. That would be my preference. So, all right, so I'm teaching this 5-day class, and so Friday afternoon, early Friday afternoon. So I'm giving my lecture, And out of the corner of my eye, I see some manager type person has positioned herself like outside that door, waiting for me to finish, and with this grim, expression on her face. So she doesn't interrupt, and I finish the lecture, and then there's a break of some sort. There's always a lunch break for lunch, but you can't go for 4 hours without some other kind of break. So there's some afternoon break of some kind. And then, she comes in the room and she says, can I talk to you? And, with this, grim expression and this grim tone of voice. So I say, well, am I in trouble? She nods her head and says, yes. So you're laughing already. I didn't think it was funny at the time. So, all right. So what happened? What happened was that these two women got offended at something I had said Wednesday morning and left because I had offended them and never came back. And they complained about it, which eventually found its way up to upper management. And by Friday, someone came down and told me about it. So, what can you say when you're teaching Introduction to C++? They can offend people to the point that they walk out and they complain about you to management. All right, so I'll tell you what happened. And as I'm telling the story, you have to imagine, an instructor who is totally oblivious that what he's saying could be offensive. Maybe after a while it'll be hard to imagine that, but truly, this instructor is totally oblivious. And he's saying anything offensive. So we had gotten to the chapter on visibility keywords. And I was explaining, as you do in an introductory class, that there are, these 3 visibility keywords in C++, private, public, and protected. And all right, so we're not going to do protected yet because, you really can't understand what protected is good for until we do inheritance. And we haven't done chapter 1 inheritance yet. So if you're not doing inheritance, and protected is just like private. So we're just going to concentrate now on public and private. And, when you're defining a class, then you can label various parts of the class with, with the public keyword or the private keyword, right? And the parts that are private are untouchable. Right? No one can write them. No one can even read them. Right? And the parts that are public are like the opposite of untouchable. Like anyone can touch them. Right? Anyone can read them. And anyone can write them unless they're declared to be constant. And there's also this keyword called friend, but you're laughing already. All right. Either remember my talk from 5 years ago or you know where this is going. All right. And there's also a keyword called friend, by means of which you can give permission to another function to touch your private parts, which are generally untouchable. But with the friend keyword, so you can designate either an external function or a member function of some other class, and then then it can touch all the private parts. But the friend keyword appears in the class declaration, not in the function declaration, because the external function cannot designate to itself permission to touch your private parts. I thought, only you can decide who can touch your private parts. For some reason, these people were offended. And so, I mean, this is the worst thing that's happened in my career. And it has permanently changed the way I teach. First of all, I mean, this happened like more than 10 years ago. Nonetheless, whenever I'm teaching, if anyone walks out of the room while I'm teaching, I instantly, like mentally, I freeze. You know, I do this double take in my head, like, what did I just say? What did I say right before that person stood up and left the room? Did I say anything that could possibly be interpreted in an offensive way? I mean, this is going to be with me for the rest of my life. For the rest of my life, whenever anyone leaves the room, you know, I'm going to, I might not show it, but I'm going to panic. I'm going to wonder, all right, did I just offend that person? I mean, they're leaving the room because they, you know, they need to do like fluid equilibrium, or they got a text message, or, you know, something. But also, I never talk about the parts of a class. I never use that word. I never talk about the members of a class because that's almost just as bad. I still talk about member functions and member data because that's the terminology of object-oriented programming. But the unqualified word, unless it's followed immediately by the word function or data, I just never use that word. I always now talk about the components of a class, which is a like awkward word, but you have to be careful because, like, I don't want this kind of thing to happen twice in my career. All right. So, you know, everyone thinks this is funny. And yeah, it would be funny if it happened to someone else, but this actually bothers me a lot. For reasons that may not be entirely obvious. I don't know if anyone here has ever been in the military. I've never been in the military, but over the course of my career, I've had a lot of students who have been in the military. They consume a lot of training, and I have a lot of respect for them. And I've learned a lot about the military from my students over the years. So one interesting thing I learned is that different standards of behavior are required of you when you are in uniform than when you are not in uniform. When you're in uniform, you're not even allowed to go to a store and buy a six-pack of beer. That's true. Because people are going to look at you and say, "Oh, those drunken sailors." Yeah, the moment they land in some port, they go out and they buy beer. And they're going to get drunk. Like, I always knew drunken sailors. I know what they're like. So you can't. I mean, there's a lot of things you're not allowed to do when you're in uniform, because when you're in uniform, you are like representing the United States military, and to a certain extent, you're representing the country. You're representing the United States. So you're required to hold yourself to a higher standard. All right, so I am recognizably a Jew. I wear this little skull cap on my head, which means that whenever I do anything, I am, in a sense, representing my people. It's like I'm always in uniform. So somewhere in Kansas City, Kansas, there are two women who think that Orthodox Jews are perverts. And yeah, that really does bother me. But I can't do anything about it now, other than tell a funny story about it, to other people. But I've never recovered from that. All right. So, all right, since I've told you about that, I may as well now tell you about the only other time in my career when I got into trouble, although not that kind of trouble. But I was asked, well, I'll tell you what happened. I was teaching a class in, I don't remember now whether it was C or C++ or maybe even some other programming language. Again, it was an on-site class, so I was using the company's facilities. And this company, you know, they wanted the class to be conducted on Microsoft Windows. So our programming classes, as you know, involve programming. You're not going to learn how to program if you just sit in your chair and watch me lecture about programming, no matter how vivid and entertaining I am when I lecture. You know, there has to be periods, lecture, and then lab exercises. And even during the lecture, I got to present examples on the screen, which hopefully, you know, the students like follow along and actually write the programs that I'm writing in front of them at the same time as I'm doing it, and, you know, compiling them at the same time. So I'm working on this unfamiliar operating system because I am, I think, the only computer professional in the world who has successfully stayed away from Microsoft Windows his entire life. So yeah, I don't do Windows, but, you know, I have to at least minimally function on Windows in order to teach this class. So I'm making these snide remarks. All right, so now we got to edit this program using something called Notepad. You know, because, you know, if this was like a real operating system, you know, then Emacs would have come pre-installed. So, all right, so I'm, you know, making these remarks while I'm teaching. You know, it's not interfering with the quality of my teaching. You know, I think I'm just engaging in a running joke, which, you know, maybe is not very funny. Well, I think it was funny. But after 2 days, so I'm told that I'm not going to continue teaching this class. They're going to get someone else to teach the, you know, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, because they were offended, you know, that I had been talking trash about Microsoft Windows for 2 days. I mean, if I had been teaching to a class of Microsoft executives, yeah, then I would know not to do that. But I'm just teaching class to normal people who have to, on whom Windows has been inflicted. So I thought, if anything, they might be like grateful that someone else sympathized with their condition, but no. So I have. So, all right. So that's another thing I never do. Again. All right. No matter. What do you mean, except here? You know? Never. Well, I mean, here. I mean, what are you going to do to me? Right? You're going to fire me? You're not paying me to be here anyway. So, so I never do that again. I never criticize, you know, the platform. All right. So now that I've told you some bad things that happened to me, let's move to some more interesting and less bad things that have happened. By the way, I noticed it's almost 7 o'clock already, and I've only told 2 stories. So, I mean, we can stay after 7:30, right? Yeah? Okay, fine.
You just may get people leaving.
Oh, no.
So for your own panic, just set the expectations.
Oh, no. I don't
We're
know.
offended at how long I took at the start, so sorry.
All right, so, wow. People, I don't know if I can handle that. All right, so here's an interesting story. I was teaching a class in Colorado Springs, and I think it was XView programming or maybe Motif programming to a Lockheed Martin facility. This is a company that had just been bought by Lockheed Martin. So the Lockheed Martin sign was had still not been plastered everywhere. But it was part of Lockheed Martin. And you could see Cheyenne Mountain from the building where I was teaching. And I'm pretty sure that my students worked in Cheyenne Mountain because they didn't tell me where they worked. So if you're in Colorado Springs and your students don't tell you where they work, there's a good chance they're working in Cheyenne Mountain. So, well, I'll tell you later. Similar things can be guessed with a fair amount of certainty if you're in Augusta, Georgia, or if you are in Columbia, Maryland. Anyway, so, but this was a very, very secure facility. So everyone, here's how secure the facility was. So normally, as I said, you teach a programming class, there's lecture and lab and lecture and lab and lecture and lab. They would not allow any computers in the lecture room because I didn't have apparently the right kind of clearance that allowed me to be in the same room as one of their computers. So I actually did get a secret clearance later in my career. If there's time, maybe I'll tell you about that because that's an interesting story too. It took 18 months. By the time I got it, I didn't need it anymore. But this is before I had gotten any security clearance. And even if I had a secret clearance, who knows, maybe that wouldn't have been enough. Maybe, you needed, double secret clearance, in order to be in the same room as one of their computers. So instead of doing lecture lab, I did all the lecture in the first half of the day. No lab. And then second half of the day, they all went into another room where I was not allowed to go and did the labs for that day, while I remained in this empty lecture room so that if the students had any difficulty during the lab, the student would come out and then describe to me in words, right, the nature of the problem, which I would then have to debug and fix based on this verbal description of the problem. So normally, you're in the same room as the student says, I'm having a problem. Well, let me come over and look at it. So, oh, I see. You forgot a semicolon over here. So, no, that's what I had to do. I had to sit in that room for 4 hours in case some students came out to describe the problem. So that's how secure this facility was. And everyone had to wear a badge. The employees, and certainly me. Right? And, the badge had my name on it. And the purpose of the visit. And, my security clearance, because I didn't have one. So the purpose of my visit, the reason I was there was instructor. That's what I was. And so that's what it said on my badge. And the event didn't have any clearance associated with it. So it was characterized as uncleared. But I guess there wasn't enough space to type uncleared. So my badge just said unclear. So for 5 days, whenever I was in that facility, I had to wear a badge that said, Shachter, unclear instructor. All right. So I loved that so much that at the end of the week, I asked if I could take it home with me. And the badge had an expiration date on it. So no harm could come from letting me take it home with me. So they let me take it home. It's one of my prized possessions. So I have it here. So unfortunately, the people who are attending this meeting remotely, I'm not going to get a good look at it. But those of you who are here in person, I just love this. Unclear instructor. So I'm going to pass it around in case anyone wants to look at it. So just please make sure that it returns to me, because it truly is one of my prized possessions. All right. So, all right. So speaking of secure facility, all right. What did I just say? I said, speaking of, and then it's not even 7:30 yet. All right, so he must have been offended. All right. I don't know what it was. So. All right, so speaking about secure facilities and cyber warfare and all that. So, all right, so I taught a class in Augusta, Georgia, in network programming. So Augusta, Georgia, right outside of Augusta, Georgia, is Fort Gordon, where the Army has its cyber warriors. So you're teaching a class in network programming to a bunch of students who don't tell you where they work. And you're told to put up like particular emphasis on certain kinds of network programming that allow you to like conceal your identity. So you can be pretty sure that these are cyber warriors stationed in Fort Gordon. Just like if you're teaching a class in Columbia, Maryland, and they don't tell you, your students don't tell you where they work, then you can be pretty sure that they're NSA people. Because Fort Meade, where NSA is located, is right outside of Columbia, Maryland. And they'll never tell you that they work for NSA. People who work for the IRS are more willing to tell you that they work for the IRS. Although they usually don't tell you that either. Usually just say, well, I work for the Treasury Department. And they don't tell you what part of the Treasury Department they work for. Because for fear that someone will like let the air out of their tires or something. But the IRS are more willing to tell you where they work than NSA. NSA will never tell you where they work. The closest that in my career that ever happened was I was teaching, this is not a programming class, this was a class in Linux system administration. And then we got to the chapter on SE Linux. Anyone knows what that is. And one of my students said, so I said, oh, here's the chapter on SE Linux. And one of my students said, you're welcome. Yeah, of course, no, NSA wrote SE Linux. All right, anyway. But the great thing about Columbia, Maryland, I know this is a digression, but I love it. The main drag in Columbia, Maryland is called Snowden River Parkway. This is true. All right, I'm not making this up. So it was not named after Edward Snowden. It was named, like 100 years before Edward Snowden was born. But I still think it's great, that all these NSA employees, every morning on their way to work and every afternoon on their way from work, they're driving on Snowden River Parkway And then, Chloe, Maryland is built around shopping centers. So then they go shopping in the, Snowden River, shopping center, and they watch a movie in the, Snowden River movie house. Anyway, so this is class in network programming. So I've got these materials I'm taught to use, but I also supplemented with my own materials because I actually wrote a class on network programming because I know it pretty well. And so I'm telling them about, well, how you can create a raw socket, if anyone knows what that is. And once you have a raw socket, then you can put anything you want in your IP datagram. You can conceal your IP address. You can fake your IP address. You can even fake your Ethernet address. So, all right. Well, is it morally justifiable for me to teach these people how to do that? Well, yeah. When I teach system administration, I teach my students how to break into a computer. Because, if you don't know how to break into a computer, then you can be eaten by dinosaurs, according to Jurassic Park, which I never saw. But one of my students told me that there's this scene where, like, the bad guys have turned off the electronic defenses, and then the dinosaurs are coming to eat the good guys. And the good guys have to break into the computer before the dinosaurs come and eat them. And then the little girl says, "Oh, this is Unix. I know how to break into that." So, all right. So, yeah, you have to know how to break into a computer, otherwise dinosaurs will eat you. And so I'm, teaching these students, about all of these, clever network programming techniques, in the C language. And one point, in fact, the local television news station wanted to do a piece on like this series of classes that's being offered on network programming and computer security, and technically not cyber warfare, but I'm actually on the news in Augusta, Georgia, and I even downloaded it, and you can look at it on my website. I don't have any lines, but I'm the instructor that they keep on cutting to. So, and this is a file called tv.mp4, which is, what's wrong with that? So that's what's on the TV. And it's underneath my website, which is http://m5.chicago.il.us. This is a geographical domain, Chicago, Illinois, United States. And I'm one of the administrators of that domain, so I was able to give the M5 computer, an IP address in that domain. It's either /tv.mp4, maybe it's in the docs directory, maybe it's docs/tv.mp4. And it has to be HTTP, not HTTPS. And you got to get it right because my website is unforgiving of typing errors. So, all right, so these news cameras come in. Oh, you found it?
Yeah, it's just TV.mp4.
Okay. All right, fine. So these cameramen came in and they wanted to, take a picture of this class while it was in session. And officially, my students are not Army cyber warriors. They're just these people taking this class. But, the guy who was in charge of access insisted, he said, "Oh, you can cover this class in the news, but you may not take a picture of anyone's face, except mine. All right, but you may not take a picture of any student's face." So, because I don't know, because they wanted to. Oh, you. Right. There we go. So now the people who are online can see it too. Because I don't know, these students are going to go on and they're going to be secret agents somewhere, and their identity has to be concealed. So, but if you actually look at the news clip, so the cameras were behind the students. You don't see anyone's face, but the students are all looking at their monitors, and you can see their faces reflected in the monitors. So it makes you wonder, like how smart are the people who are responsible for our cyber warfare program? When they don't it's not easy to tell who these students are, but like a foreign country would certainly have the resources to like get their faces from the reflection in the monitors. So that's kind of scary, actually. But all right, that's an interesting story. All right, so I think my someone's leaving. What did I say? Oh, I said something offensive, no doubt. All right, so is my badge then? Oh, here it is. All right. So since I've shown you one of my prized possessions, I'll now show you one of my other prized possessions. So, whenever I teach C++, from the morning of day one to the afternoon of the last day, every language feature I teach, I illustrate with frogs. I mean, there's nothing I cannot illustrate with frogs. The only thing that I don't illustrate with frogs is multiple inheritance. When I do multiple inheritance, I do it with pandas. So everything else is frogs. So like day one, right, I'm teaching the principle of data abstraction. So I say, all right, so in a procedural programming language like C, you define a data type, we say a struct frog. Then you say, struct frog, and then open curly brace. And then you decide, well, what attributes of a frog does my program need to know? So I say, let's say my program needs to know the age and the weight of frogs. So so they're going to be integers. So up to the open curly brace, I say int age, semicolon, int weight, semicolon, close curly brace. And then because this is C and not Java, I have a semicolon after close curly brace, and that's my frog data type. Whereas in an object-oriented programming language, between the curly braces, you have not only attributes, but also behavior. Right? You have data and you have functions. You ask yourself, not only what attributes of frogs does my program need, but also what behavior of frogs. What are frogs going to be doing in this program? So, what does a frog do? A frog, jump, croak, lay eggs, catch flies with its tongue. So, catch flies with its tongue. There's something is offensive about catching flies with your tongue. All right, I don't know what it was, but I'm losing my audience.
Should have gone with pandas.
I will do pandas later. Hope that doesn't offend even more people. I don't know. Maybe there's some foreign language where frog is an obscenity. Anyway, so all right. So then you have you have data declarations and you have function declarations. So the point is that even the most elementary language feature I illustrate with frogs. When we do the chapter on inheritance, so I said, all right. So suppose you've got this frog class, which is a model for frogs. Now suppose you want to model a subset of frogs. which are characterized by, say, additional attributes or additional behavior. You want to have a bullfrog. So a bullfrog is a frog, but so since it's a frog, then it has an age and a weight. Implicitly, you don't have to say it. Just from the fact that a bullfrog is a frog, you know it has an age and a weight, and you know that it can jump and croak and lay eggs and catch flies with its tongue. But bullfrogs have additional behavior. There are things that bullfrogs can do that frogs in general cannot do. All frogs can jump and croak and lay eggs and catch flies, but a bullfrog can sing joy to the world. So you have so you class bullfrog, public frog, open curly brace, and then you have this sing joy to the world method that is declared close curly brace semicolon, and that's how I illustrate inheritance. And then I say, well, actually, there's three kinds of inheritance. There's public inheritance and private inheritance and protected inheritance, and no one has ever used protected inheritance. No one has ever figured out what it's good for. But private inheritance, although rare, is sometimes seen. Private inheritance is like, well, yeah, I'm a frog, and therefore I can do all these froggish things that I learned from my frog ancestors, but I don't like doing them in public. In fact, I don't like referring to myself as a frog. I prefer to call myself a froggish American. And yeah, I'll do these frog-like things when I'm with other froggish Americans. Then we can get down and we can do these froggish things. But otherwise, when I'm just in public, then no one can get me to do these froggish things because I don't want to be conspicuously a frog. I just want to be a froggish American. So all right, so that's part of the illustration of private inheritance. Operator overloading. All right. Let's operate, so, when you declare any class, you got certain operators, free of charge. You get an assignment operator and a copy constructor, and you get new and delete and size of. And in most cases, you can override. Even though you get these free of charge, and, in most cases, you can override the default behavior. So if you want to change the way new frog is performed, instead of just using malloc, you want to say have your own pre-allocated pool of frogs, or perhaps in this context we should say a pond of frogs. Then you can do that, and you can override operator new for frog. In fact, there's another very obscure use of the new operator, which is rarely seen, but you see it sometimes. You can say new P frog, where P is an address of pre-existing area and memory into which a frog is born, which ought to be the name of a movie, but probably is not. But if you happen a few years from now to see a movie called The Frog is Born, then you'll know that I left this field and I made it big in Hollywood. Because that's probably me. So, all right, so everything I do with frogs, except for multiple inheritance. Multiple inheritance I do with pandas, because biologists, you might not have known this, biologists are actually in disagreement with one another about the proper classification of the panda. Some biologists think that a panda is a very large raccoon, and some biologists think that a panda is a very cute bear. Well, if you're a C++ programmer, a panda can be both. A panda can be a bear, which is also a raccoon. Right? You can say, class panda, public bear, public raccoon, and The order in which you mention these classes is actually significant, although usually you don't care. And then inside the curly braces, you could have additional attributes and behaviors that distinguish pandas from other animals that are also both bears and raccoons. Or you could have nothing inside the curly braces, because just by saying that a panda is a bear and raccoon, you have everything you want. And then what do you do, like, if the bear parent class has a hunt method and the raccoon parent class is a hunt method? And, what do you do if P is a panda and you tell P to hunt? Well, you don't want to dishonor your bear parent by hunting like a raccoon, and you don't want to dishonor your raccoon parent by hunting like a bear. So, you have a nervous breakdown and you cause a compiler error, because, a child should never be asked to choose between his or her two parents. So, you have to disambiguate it. P dot bear double colon hunt, or P dot, raccoon double colon, or you can override both inherited methods and just define your own. I'm not going to do it like this parent does it, and I'm not going to do it like that parent does it. I'm going to do it my own way, which is also okay. So, and what if you have like this diamond-shaped inheritance hierarchy? Because like bear and raccoon are both descended from carnivore. So, and even though pandas are supposedly not carnivores, but bears and raccoons are classified as carnivores. There are two of the six families in order Carnivora of class Mammalia. Subphylum Vertebrata, phylum Chordata. You learn so much useful information, when Shachter is your instructor. So, you have this diamond-shaped inheritance hierarchy. So then, well, how many copies do I have of the grandparent attributes? So that depends on whether bear and raccoon are using, a virtual inheritance or non-virtual inheritance. And that shows you how sometimes derivation can be invasive, even though it's not supposed to be. But you may define your panda to be a bear and raccoon, and then you have to go back and change the definition of bear and raccoon, because the person who originally designed bear and raccoon, didn't say anything about virtual inheritance, because you never do that unless you anticipate someone's going to use you in multiple inheritance with a diamond-shaped hierarchy, which you never. So, which is why that multiple inheritance is hard, and a lot of programmers don't like it, and that's why Java didn't have it for so many years. Java officially still doesn't have it, but it really does, because interfaces can now have default implementations. So you extend one class and implement another interface. That's multiple inheritance. And it's a headache, and it's a nightmare, because now your inheritance graph doesn't look like a tree; it looks like a spider web. But when you need it, right? So that takes maybe like part of one afternoon when I do pandas, and then it's back to frogs. The whole week is frogs. So, all right, so I'm teaching this class in San Diego, California. It's Introduction to C++. And as you know, San Diego is right across the border from Tijuana. So in Tijuana, they wait for the American tourists to arrive and then sell them incredibly tacky lawn ornaments or other incredibly tacky things. It is it's any American tourist who goes to Tijuana must return with some incredibly tacky object bought in Tijuana. So on Thursday night, after class was over, a couple of my students, I remember they sat in the back of the room. I don't know whether they knew each other before class or whether they grew to know one another during class, but they went to Tijuana and they came back with this big green porcelain frog and presented it to me. Friday afternoon after class. So I was very touched. And I was flying back that afternoon. I found a way somehow to fit it in my carry-on luggage, which was full, but I found a way to put a big green porcelain frog in it. And I brought it home. And it is one of my prized possessions, so which I brought here. So, oh my goodness. Oh well, over the years, yeah, it has, yeah, it's lost some pieces. Yeah, it's lost some pieces over the years, mostly when I bring it here to, anyway, but, all right, so here is, again, another one of my prized possessions from my students in San Diego as a token of their esteem. So, I don't know, do you need me to put it in front of the camera? And I have it in my living room.
Have you named it?
I have not.
You think it's time?
It's 7. I'm going to go out past 7:30. I'm sorry. We have this room, right?
Yes.
All right. So you haven't seen the inside of my house. My house is full of books. I have bookshelves everywhere. I have bookshelves in the kitchen and in the bathroom. And in my living room, I have this bookshelf, which it goes the entire length of one of the walls of my living room, right next to the ceiling. The shelf is like 1 foot underneath the ceiling. So like you're sitting in the living room, it's not eye level. So you're not going to see it. But the frog is there, among all the other books. So like sometimes people come to my house and they're sitting in the living room, and after like maybe an hour and a half, either her eye looks up and the guest sees this frog, so says, "Why do you have a big green frog up there in your bookshelf?" To which the answer clearly is, "Well, because I'm a C++ instructor." Anyway, so all right, that's the frog story. So all right, another visual aid that I brought has to do with the class that I was asked to teach in the Boost libraries at the company formerly known as Motorola. And Motorola, in some sense, still exists, parts of it. Most of it was like split up and sold off. And part of it was sold to, a large part of it was sold to Nokia. And Nokia had this joint venture with Siemens, Nokia Siemens network. And I was asked to teach 6 classes in the Boost libraries to a bunch of these employees of the NSN, Nokia Siemens network. And the classes were well received, and they then asked me to teach 3 more classes. So the 6 were in Illinois, then they asked me to teach 3 more in Texas. Because these programmers, a whole bunch of programmers in the United States, were going to take over some code that was being maintained in Poland. And now the American programmers were being given the responsibility of maintaining it. And it was forbidden for them in maintaining this code to use any Boost libraries that were newer than 2008. So, this was not 2025, but it was like late teens. It was like, 2019 or something. So, first of all, I had to find a textbook that described the Boost libraries of 2008. Even though I was mostly going to be teaching the class using my own examples, so students expect to walk away with the textbook. I'm spending so much money on this class, or more precisely, I'm spending so much money on my students, on my employees, so they should at least get a textbook out of it. So where am I going to find a textbook that describes the Booth Library's 2000? I found one. So it took a long time, but I found this book, which actually was written in 2006 and had never been revised. I was still able to buy it. The dedication of the book is "In memory of the dead, in honor of the living," which I think is appropriate. So, all right, so I had to spend like 5 days, 9 times, teaching these poor programmers how to program using the 2008 versions of the Booth libraries, because management had decided we're not going to like update. A phenomenon that I'm sure like you're familiar with. All right. So I see some people grinning here. And yeah, so I taught them various topics, mostly with my own examples. But these are also topics mentioned, illustrated in the book, except for optional. I distinctly remember I taught them optional, which is not mentioned in the book. Oh, it's mentioned, but it's not illustrated anywhere. All right. So there were a couple books left over. And this is not one of my prized possessions. In fact, I'm going to leave it here. And if anyone wants it, you can have it. Right? In fact, I hope it will not be here by the time I leave today, even though it may have great historical value, to some collector. So,
I think somebody raised their hand in the video.
Oh,
I don't know if you want
you have to be here in person in order to take it home. No.
There's still wait for them to even type it anyway, because I learned my lesson a year ago. So they got to be in Discord to ask a question.
Yeah, the author is Bjorn Carlson, if I'm pronouncing that O with the umlaut correctly. BJO umlaut RN. Carlson is just KARLSSON. Oh, somebody left. So, all right, someone's offended because I mispronounced the Norwegian name. All right. Am I going to sign? I didn't write it. I mean, I'll sign it if you want me. I will. If anyone wants me to sign it, I will sign it. But you have to, but only if you take it from me. So, now what's really bad about what I had to teach these programmers is, they also had to learn Boost lambdas. Right? So, a lot of what starts in the Boost libraries ends up as part of the official language definition. So, yeah, learning what was in the Boost libraries 20 years ago can be useful because maybe 15 years ago it found its way into the standard. But the Boost libraries do not introduce anything into the language that requires actually changing the grammar of the language, because the Boost libraries are done entirely in header files. So you can't do something in Boost libraries that requires rewriting the compiler. Right? Only the ANSI standard committee can force everyone to rewrite his or her compiler. So, lambdas are very useful, and they did eventually find their way into the language, and they're great. And then Java adopted them too, so now Java has lambdas. But when lambdas were added to the language, it involved changing the grammar of the language with that funny, arrows and square bracket stuff. So Boost, did lambdas an entirely different way. So I had to teach these programmers how to use lambdas the way they were done in the Boost libraries in 2008. And that has got to be like the most useless knowledge that I've ever taught to anyone, except perhaps the names of the 6 families of carnivores, which are Felidae, Felidae, cats, Canidae, dogs, Ursidae, bears, Raccoonidae, raccoons, Sealidae, and Weaselidae. The last of which I totally made up. All right. Other than that, so this is like the most useless knowledge I've ever taught. But I'm very glad I taught those classes at Nokia, because one of the advantages of being an instructor rather than a programmer, and I've been a programmer too, because you have to be, because your customers insist. Yes, and I won't be offended. You will be the one who's offended. I will panic and wonder, what did I do to offend you? You're gonna miss some good stuff, man. So one of the advantages of being an instructor rather than a programmer is that when you are an instructor, you sometimes get free stuff, like clothes. Like the week when I was teaching one of my classes at Nokia, Siemens pulled out of the Nokia Siemens network. So Nokia still found a way to retain NSN. They found something else that the S could stand for. So all of their stuff that's had NSN on it, they can still use, but they had a whole bunch of stuff that said Nokia Siemens networks. So an announcement came out during one of the weeks when I was there. It says, we have a whole pile of clothes that all say Nokia Siemens network on it. So anyone who wants it can come and get some. So I actually didn't want any, but I could have furnished myself with t-shirts and sweatshirts and I don't know, tote bags maybe. That's if I wanted to go around toting something that said Nokia Siemens networks. So that is a great advantage to being an instructor. They give you free clothing. So, and one thing that I did take advantage of was I was teaching. I did a lot of teaching in my career for Sun Microsystems, the company formerly known as Sun Microsystems. Oracle bought it and immediately rebranded it to Oracle. Which, like when IBM bought Red Hat, it retained the Red Hat name. But when Oracle bought Sun, it just, I don't know why. The Sun brand I thought was pretty good. It was, was very well known. But so anyway, before Oracle bought it, I taught a lot for Sun. At one point, it was my largest customer. So I remember one week I was scheduled to teach a class in Manhattan, which I love. And then at the last minute, they said, oh, we need you to go to teach some other class in the middle of Pennsylvania that week, because we can get someone else to teach that class in Manhattan, but you're the only person who can teach that class in the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. And I said, oh, I'm already under contract to go to Manhattan, which I love. I don't want to go to the middle of nowhere in Pennsylvania. Well, please do it. Well, fine, I'll do it, but only if you give me a Java jacket. Because Sun had these really cool leather jackets that said Java on it. So I extorted a Java jacket from Sun Microsystems. So now I have a leather jacket that says Java on it that I can take with me when I go to biker conventions.
Are you giving that away too?
I am not. I am not. All right. As you can tell, it has been very well used over the years. So it's like falling apart, But that's okay for the biker conventions that I go to. So All right. Now I'm going to say I do not know how to dress spiffy. All right. So I did manage to extort a Java jacket from them. Plus, you get a lot of free stuff, a lot of free coffee mugs. So another advantage of the in-person training over the online training, right? They give you coffee mugs. So, and sometimes, there are fewer people in the class than were expected. So I get to take home all the extra coffee mugs. I got coffee mugs from companies that don't even exist anymore. Well, like Sun. It's a coffee mug from Sun Education. And Silicon Graphics. I don't know to what extent Silicon Graphics still exists. I think it exists to some extent, but it's kind of disappeared. So, but I loved Silicon Graphics, and I still have their coffee mug. And Hewlett Packard, and on Red Hat. So another advantage being instructor. And actually, I have a lot of Sun coffee mugs. So anyone wants this, you can have it. So maybe it has sentimental value to some of you who used to work with Sun workstations, or maybe it has, I don't know, value to some collectors of antiques. But I have more at home, so anyone can have that one who wants it. And another advantage of being an instructor is sometimes you get free laptops. Why do you get free laptops? Because post-COVID now, so this is a story that I didn't tell before. I'm teaching this online class, and it's to military people. The military consumes a lot of training. And apparently some general somewhere had decided that Zoom is not secure. So I had to teach my class using Adobe Connect. And all right, you're laughing because you know what it is. I've never heard of it before. All right. So we tried to get Adobe Connect to work on any one of my Unix laptops. And it's supposed to work on Linux, but we couldn't get it to work. So my client said, well, you need to you need to do this on Windows. I do not have a Windows laptop. Well, we're just going to have to send you one. So they sent me, this surplus laptop that had Windows on it. And so I tried to use it with Adobe Connect. And then I said, well, this laptop doesn't see my wireless network. Well, did you turn the little switch, to on, on the side of the laptop? Oh yeah, it sees other wireless networks. Sees 2.4 networks in the neighborhood, but it doesn't see any 5 networks. So they had to send me another laptop. So I got 2 free laptops, out of this client. Programmers don't get free laptops, but instructors sometimes do. The disadvantage is that they had Windows on them, but I know how to deal with that. I kept the existing Windows systems, but I shrunk it. I know how to do that. And then with the disk storage reclaimed, I installed 5 different versions of Linux and 4 operating systems that were Unix but not Linux, like Solaris and NetBSD and OpenBSD, and then Haiku and FreeDOS or something, and React OS. Oh, and Plan 9. Well, not Plan 9, 9 Front, which is a fork of Plan 9. Plan 9 is kind of dead. So, this is now my multi boot laptop. And then the other laptop, yeah, I was a little less big, but I put some good stuff on that also. I'd not bought it, so I didn't even know what it was capable of. Like a year and a half after they sent it to me, I found out that it had a touch screen. So, I mean, how am I supposed to know? I mean, who goes around, touching, your screen, but like once I accidentally touched the screen and the mouse cursor moved. I said, oh, cool. No, they sent me a laptop with a touch, which I would have known that I had bought it, but I hadn't bought it. So, but the real big advantage of being an instructor is shared with any job that involves a lot of travel, because travel is educational. You see a lot of different places, and you see how a lot of people live who are different from you, even if they're only slightly different from you. It's educational. Like, that's just a simple matter, like when you turn on the radio in the morning to listen to the morning news. Right? Oh, lost another one. So, like in Chicago, when you listen to the morning news, the newscaster tells you what's the weather and traffic, because that's what's news, right? That's what's different today than yesterday. Whereas, like in Northern California during the dry season, they never tell you the weather, because it's not news. It's the same as yesterday's weather. Right? Like for 6 months in Northern California, it never rains. You know it's not going to rain. Right? There aren't even clouds in the sky. Sky is completely blue. So you don't hear that on the radio. In Arizona, I'm not making this up, this is true. You turn on the radio on Monday morning, and they tell you how many people died over the weekend crossing the desert trying to get to the United States. Because every week there's a number, right? and it's never zero. So that's what's on the news in Arizona. In Alaska, a bunch of stuff to tell you about my class in Alaska. In Alaska, you turn on the radio in the morning, and you're told how many hours of sunlight there are going to be today. You don't hear that in Chicago, but in Alaska, like the number of hours of sunlight ranges from 3 to 21. So it's going to be different today than it was yesterday. That's news. So yeah, that's interesting. So anyway, speaking of Alaska, so I mean we've gone past 7:30 anyway. So I have in my notes, I'm supposed to say at this point, I'll tell you the story about Alaska later if there's time, but we've already run out of time. So yeah, I taught a class in the outside of Anchorage. So I mean, Anchorage is well south of the Arctic Circle. So sun rises and sets every day of the year. But they still tell you how many hours of sunlight there are in the day, because it's still even though the sun rises and sets every day, but like say in the longest days of summer, the sun may set, but it never gets dark, because the sun never gets very far below the horizon, and then a few hours later it comes up again. So if you have a teenager and your teenager goes out and they say, I'll be home before dark, and you may not see that child for weeks. So, but I had to teach a class in the Elmendorf Air Force Base, which you may or may not know is right outside of Anchorage. Could have been worse. It could have been the Eielson Air Force Base, which is outside of Fairbanks. This is December. So getting through all that snow in Fairbanks would have been quite an experience, but Anchorage in December is still kind of formidable. And the people who had contracted for the class did not trust anyone from the lower 48 to be able to drive a rental car in Anchorage in December. So they said I could stay on base in officer billeting the entire week. So they had, an airman come and pick me up at the Air Force. I mean, at the airport, I meant to say. And then he drove me to the Air Force base and, put me in officer billeting. But in order to put me in officer billeting, they had to give me a rank because they had to know what kind of quarters I was entitled to. Question?
Unclear?
Oh, yes. No. That reminds me, where did I put? Oh, there it is. Okay. Want to make sure I don't lose it. They had to give me a rank. So, yeah, they looked at my education and decided that I was the equivalent of a major. So they.
That was what we guessed. We decided you were major.
Really?
Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
Well, should I be insulted? You didn't think I was the general? So,
I don't know.
not even a colonel. So, all right. Anyway, so they put me in a majors, and they said I could go to the officers club that week, so I could dance and get down with the other officers at the base, which I did not do. I did shop at the commissary, which they said I could do. So I've never been in the military, but because of my career as an instructor, I do have a rank in the Air Force. So that's cool. But you get to travel not only within the United States, which is very educational, but also internationally. Right? I've taught in 40 to 50 states, but I also have taught in every inhabited continent except South America. And I speak French fluently, which I would not say if there were any French people in this room, because I never say that in the presence of French people, but because I do not speak French as well as someone whose native language is French, but I speak it fairly well. Well enough that I can teach classes in it. So I've taught classes in Paris, in Dakar, Senegal, which I love. I love Dakar, Senegal. I wish Chicago was more like Dakar. It's my metropolis with 3 million people, with skyscrapers and big boulevards and goats and sheep on the sidewalks. So I wish I could see that in Chicago, but you don't see that. Oh, and in the big boulevards, like big avenues, right next to the cars and the buses, you see horses. So anyway, it's very educational to go around the world and then see a lot of different countries. And I wish more Americans did it. And I wish more Americans spoke more than one language, because it really helps to understand that the fact that not everyone sees the world the same way if you speak more than one language. So I truly, honestly think that one of the reasons why the United States makes so many mistakes in foreign policy is that Americans only speak one language. So they just don't understand that other people can see the world differently than you do. But I just learned so much. Like I was teaching the class in Canada for Siemens, the same Siemens that we mentioned earlier. And there was a big barrel of beer in the lunchroom. Like in the United States, your employer provides you with a pot of coffee in the lunchroom. So there was beer. So what, is this a Canadian thing? I mean, I've taught in a lot of Canadian cities. I've taught in Ottawa and Toronto and Calgary. I could tell you a story about that, but I don't think we have time. What's this about the beer? So, well, it's not a Canadian thing, it's a German thing. Germans love their beer. So just like in the United States, your employer will put coffee in the lunchroom, and someone's nodding his head, so he's familiar with the phenomenon. And in Germany, your employer will put a big barrel of beer in the lunchroom. So that's definitely an incentive for working for Siemens. You know, you don't have to come here, you know, to get a few cans of beer during happy hour. You know, you can get all the beer you want. Cultural differences between countries is really interesting. Like in the United States, a lunch hour is typically an hour. So we call it a lunch hour. I taught classes in London. In London, they give you 30 minutes for lunch. And the training company wasn't even providing lunch. You know, you had to go out and find a restaurant and eat lunch and then be back in 30 minutes. But this is like in the heart of London. So they figured, yeah, you can go out and find a restaurant and get something to eat and then come back in 30 minutes. So a few weeks later, as part of the same trip, I crossed the English Channel and taught in Paris, which, by the way, they do not call it the English Channel in France. Kind of like, you know, the United States doesn't call it the Gulf of Mexico. So they call it La Manche over there. So, I mean, not far from where I was teaching just a couple of weeks earlier. In Paris, I assume that other parts of France are even more laid back than Paris, because Paris is like, you know, a vibrant city, you know, where very important decisions are being made every day by the captains of industry and all, et cetera, et cetera. In Paris, you have to have at least 75 minutes for lunch, because no French person is going to tolerate, you know, being told, you know, you have to go out, have lunch, and then be back in less than 75 minutes. C'est impossible, as comme on dit en français, as we say in French. Yeah, it's impossible. Ce n'est pas civilisé, right? It's not civilized, you know. So that is, yeah, that's very, very interesting. All right, so let's end with what skills have I acquired over the course of my career from being an instructor. And I have acquired some very impressive skills. Someone, 8 o'clock, yeah, but I'm still going, all right, but I'm almost done. So I have the ability, the very impressive ability, to write a 30-line program very quickly, and it's always flawless. Why do I have this ability? Because you have to do that when you're an instructor. Because however many examples you may have prepared in advance, someone's going to ask you a question about some topic for which you did not prepare an example. Right? Someone's going to raise a hand and say, well, I don't understand pointers to member data. Can you please explain it to me and give an example? So I say, well, all right, pointers to member data are a very old part of the language. They've been around like forever. I mean, the language had pointers to member data even before it had templates and exception handling. And it's been around for like 40 years. And in those 40 years, no one has ever used them. So, I mean, you see pointers to member functions sometimes in dispatch table. No one has ever used pointers to member data. But since you want to know how they are, what they are, so it's like you have a pointer and say a pointer to a frog, and you don't know at compile time what frog you're extracting a member of. I mean, pardon me, a component of. So if I say p arrow weight, and maybe you're extracting Kermit's weights, or maybe you're extracting Jeremiah's weights, because Kermit is the frog and Jeremiah is the bullfrog. And that will be determined by events that occur at runtime. So, well, similarly, pointer to data is when you're extracting a component from an object and you don't know at compile time what component you're extracting. Now, that's when you have the asterisk on the right of the period or the arrow. So you say, Kermit dot asterisk p, And you don't know at compile time whether you're extracting Kermit's age or Kermit's weight. So that depends on events that will occur at runtime. So you declare these things the same way you use them. That's generally how it works in this language. So you would say, well, age and weight are integers. So you say int, frog, double colon, star, p, semicolon, and then you assign it a value. You say p equals ampersand frog double colon age, or p equals ampersand frog double colon weight. And then you can say Kermit dot star p. So you're extracting an unknown component from a known object. Or maybe you have the asterisk on the right side of the arrow. So you have like fp arrow star p. So now you're extracting an unknown component from an unknown object. Now, both of which will depend on events that occur at runtime. And as I'm saying this, I have to be writing the example as quickly as I'm describing it, because these people have paid a lot of money to get 8 hours of instruction per day. And they're not paying all that money to sit in their chair and watch as I write out an example. And the example has to be 30 lines long, because it has to fit on the screen. All of it has to fit on the screen, because if you can't see the whole program all at once, then the educational value of the example is vastly impaired. And it has to be perfect. It has to compile immediately without any stupid compiler errors. And it has to run correctly without any stupid runtime errors, because they're paying a lot of money for this training, and they're not paying all that money to watch me fix a stupid compiler error, and they're not paying all that money to watch me locate and fix a stupid runtime error. So over the years, I've acquired a very impressive skill of writing very quickly, perfect 30-line programs. And this skill is completely useless. So, I mean, I don't want to be accused of modesty. So, I mean, I think I'm a fairly good programmer, but my skill as a programmer, in large part, does not result from my experience as an instructor. But in the real world, when do you write a 30-line program? When was the last time you wrote, even in college? Well, when in the real world do you write a 30-line program in C or C++? Even in college, you didn't do that. In fact, when was the last time you wrote a program? I mean, in the real world, you don't write programs. You have these huge projects in which a whole team of programmers, write programs. And you have project managers, and you have your weekly Scrum meetings. Now, the project manager says, all right, Shachter, you will be responsible for the amphibian classes, and you got to write class frog, class toad, class newt, and class salamander. And then, all right, you, Kozlowski, you are responsible for class bear and class raccoon and class panda and class carnivore. And, and everyone has to check in the result of his or her day's work at 5 p.m. every day. And there'll be an automatic script in the repository that compiles the current contents of the repository. And anyone whose check-in causes the compile to fail is obliged to buy donuts for everybody else on the team the next day. All right, that's the real world. Right? No one writes these 30-line programs. However, if there's ever any need for someone to write a 30-line program really fast that works perfectly the first time, then I'm your man. So, all right. At this point, I guess a couple of stories I've chosen not to tell because of the time. But all right, so the presentation is officially over. I can take we can do questions and answers now. But before we do questions and answers, I did not drink any beer during the happy hour because I had a presentation I was going to do. However, I did instruct a friend I said, for every beer that you drink, take an equivalent beer and put it in the freezer for me to drink later. So if we're going to have questions and answers now, then someone please go to the freezer and bring me. Thank you. And bring me whatever beers are there. And I figured that it wouldn't be totally frozen by the time my talk was over. So, but it would be cold. So anyway, we don't have to wait for the beer for that. I mean, I'm capable of answering questions even without beer. Well, I think your hand was up first.
Yeah. So the first question is a little bit softball. Just like, what is your favorite?
Well, there's only one. Oh, I only got one beer. All right. I'm sorry. The first.
The first question is, what is your favorite beer?
My favorite beer is the one that I'm drinking, whatever it is.
Well, like in the teaching of C++, right? What are the things that people get right in teaching? What are things that people get wrong?
Since I never get anything wrong, it's well, I'll tell you.
To you.
I think the greatest impediment to being a teacher is not being able to put yourself in other people's position, not being able to think like the way other people think. In particular, thinking that something that is obvious to you has got to be obvious to everyone. So you have to remember what it was like when you were starting out, which for me was a long time ago. Nevertheless, I remember when I was first learning C, I forgot to bring in another visual aid. All right, 5 years from now, when I give this talk again, I have a copy of a first edition of the C programming language by Kernahan and Ritchie. This is before the ANSI standard, right? This was pre-ANSI standard C. So I learned C from that book, the C programming language by Kernahan and Ritchie. So I remember, like, I had this job learning programming in C when I was 17 years old. I had a summer job prior to my senior year in college. And I was given this book to teach myself C, and I had to write some programs. And I remember struct. I remember thinking, I will never understand struct. I cannot understand struct. What is this? I mean, I'm a fraud. I mean, all my life, people have been telling me how smart I am, but I can't even understand struct. It's just a matter of days. I'm going to be exposed. I'm going to be fired. I'll never have a job again. Until finally, just one day, like, it all came crashing through. And now I understand what a struct is. Just have a table in memory. So here you have memory, which you see these bits, you treat them as an integer, and then these bits right next to them, you treat them as a float. Yeah, but all right, so after 40 years of programming, structs they're obvious, right? And part of you thinks, how could anyone not understand them? But I remember 40 years ago, or more than 40 years ago, actually it was more like 50 years ago. I remember like 50 years ago, close to 50 years ago, the panic I felt at not being able to understand this. So that's crucial to an instructor. Crucial to being a parent also, parenthetically. Like, you have to understand that your children, the things that are obvious to you are not obvious to your children. And things that are obvious to the instructor are not obvious to your students, and they're not stupid. I've never had a stupid student. They're all smart people, but yeah, you have to explain things to them in a way that they will understand it. Not all instructors are able to do that. Yeah.
What is your advice for people with imposter syndrome? It seems very common in our industry.
Well, this thing that you are an imposter, I think doesn't impair your functioning in any way. It may be unpleasant, but I don't see it as like a threat to your productivity or anything. And I know some people have it all their lives. Like Joseph Heller wrote a book called Something Happened, in which the central character, like, he's a very successful executive, but he thinks that this is not central to the story, but one of the things is that he's never lost the fear that someday he's going to be exposed for a fraud and he's going to be fired. Yeah, it may be anhedonic. You don't like it, but it doesn't prevent you from being a very productive programmer. It just makes it no fun. Yes.
What is your favorite and least favorite C++ feature to teach?
Ah. Oh, God. My favorite and least favorite C++ feature to teach. Gosh, I like teaching. I enjoy teaching. I would say teaching the boost lambdas has got to be my least favorite topic because I'm teaching them something that will be of no use to them. Well, if they ever leave the job that they have now, which is maintaining this Polish code that requires what? Archaeology. Yeah. My favorite, I guess my favorite topics are actually the stuff that I teach at the very beginning of the week, like the really elementary stuff. For people who have never programmed I mean, I teach C also, not just C++. I guess in C, my favorite topic is the system calls. I love teaching the low-level system calls. I'd like to write a book about them. I have written classes. I wrote a class in network programming. I wrote a class in Unix network programming, of course, because I don't do Windows. I wrote a class in Unix inter-process communication. Message queues and semaphore sets and sockets and all that. I like that stuff. And C++, like the stuff at the very beginning of the week, where you like introduce the elementary doctrines of object-oriented programming to students who have never encountered the doctrines of object-oriented programming. So you're getting them to think in a totally different way, changing their point of view from procedural programming to object-oriented programming. Changing, it's instead of your program as a bunch of verbs, your program as a bunch of nouns, which is more like the way the human mind operates. I like that. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for a great presentation. Not really a question, just a comment that if someone asks why you have a frog, you could just say that it's your inheritance.
All right, that is a good point to make. But I saw some hands elsewhere, but I guess whatever hands were, another one.
What operating system or distro do you currently daily drive? I know it's not Windows.
Tell you the truth, I try to keep current with everything because you never know when you're going to have a client that needs you to know something. I don't like OpenBSD because it doesn't support ZFS. And so I don't use OpenBSD for real work, even though otherwise I might like it. Because, I mean, the people behind it are very annoying people. But still, it has a good code philosophy. But I can't use it for real work because, as I indicated earlier, I have these multi-boot machines where I have like all these operating systems coexisting on the same hardware, and I have these shared directories like /home, where they either have to, in order for them to be visible to all the operating systems, they either have to be ZFS or NTFS. I'm not going to do NTFS. So I use ZFS for /home and all of these other shared directories, which OpenBSD doesn't use. I like Linux. I like Solaris, but I hate that Oracle is no longer serious about promoting Solaris. I think Solaris is really good, but Oracle seems to be content to let it die. So unfortunately, FreeBSD would be good if it wasn't so impossible to deal with. So, I mean, Linux is Linux. I mean, I mean, everyone uses Linux. I mean, some things you just can't do without Linux because people don't release source code, they just release binaries of certain things, like the Zoom client, for example. I mean, Zoom, you have to use Linux for Zoom because it won't run. Yeah, but that's bogus. So the non-Unix operating systems, they're not really mature. I mean, I wish 9front was usable, but I mean, Plan 9 started out with some really good ideas, but you can't use it for real work. It's just a toy operating system, which is sad. But Herd, I don't have Herd installed on any of my machines.
I've heard it's always going to be like 30 years out in the future.
Probably, yeah. But there is Debian Herd. It's got all the Debian software on it. But just the kernel is different. I've never installed it. I think I tried to and I couldn't. I had some problem installing it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, as you can tell, I not only teach programming languages, I also teach system administration. Everything except Windows. Yes.
You're an Emacs fan?
If it's a choice between Emacs and Notepad, that's not a hard decision to make. So, no, Emacs is when you're going to be doing a lot of editing over a long period of time. VI is when you're going to be doing a small amount of editing over a short period of time, because VI starts up more quickly. But if you're going to be doing a lot of stuff, then yeah. So you wait another second for Emacs to come out, start up, but then you'll be more productive. Oh,
We lose the room here actually in like a couple minutes.
oh, we do. Oh, but there's one more. This guy had.
Rocky has company passed by the unclear speaker.
Unclear speaker?
They use SAS a lot. So my question is, do you collaborate with SAS company? Because it was CCUG.
With the SAS company?
SAS.
I do not cooperate. I've never worked with.
Rocky Head, they use SAS. They
Who uses SAS?
Rocky Head, the company who press Rocky
Martin.
yeah.
Lockheed Martin uses
Yeah,
SAS?
Lockheed Martin, yeah.
Oh, okay. I was not obliged to do anything with SAS the week that I was there. I was just obliged to teach motif programming and then to sit in an empty room for 4 hours every day. Oh. All right, so now Bob is telling us we are actually going to lose the room in about 8 minutes. Right?
And I can